I'm about to interview Kira Lamb and Sean Gallagher about the New York Pilates Studio Bridge Training Program.
Hi,
Hi.
how are you?
Oh wait, how come you're not in my ears?
I don't know.
You can hear me okay?
I can.
I'll just take these out.
Okay. I hate when that happens.
Me
Hi,
too.
Rachel. Hi, Megan. We'll just wait for Sean to join. How you
Bye.
doing?
Good.
Good.
Pretty good. Except for my computer crashed this morning, or so I thought. So
Okay.
I've been teaching on my iPhone all day. And
Oh,
then I
yeah.
went to the Mac store, and they're like,
Uh-huh.
it's your power cord.
Oh.
That was it. I was relieved. I thought I was going to be leaving with like a new computer or something.
Hey
That would have
everybody.
been kind of
Hi,
fun. Hi, Sean.
Sean.
How
Hey
are you?
Kira.
Hi, how are you?
There's that smile.
Oh, let me get the
Hi,
comment.
Kathy. Hi, Joseph. So we got a lot of good people. Hi,
Hi
Regina.
Regina.
All right. So thanks for
Joanne.
joining, Kira, tonight. We really appreciated it. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you.
Yep. Great.
Yeah. So let's see. Why don't we start with Kira? A question for you is, how did you get started in Pilates? Like, what were you doing before you got started, and what was your introduction to Pilates in the first place?
My very first introduction to Pilates was when I was 13 years old. When I was 13 and 14, it was required, or Pilates mat was required before ballet class when I trained at Dance Theater Harlem for the summer. But I
Cool.
wouldn't say it made like an impact on me or anything. I thought it was kind of weird, um,
Uh-huh.
but I did it. And then I went back home, and I lived in Amherst, Massachusetts. That's where I grew up, and I was a
Hmm.
ballet teacher and a Spanish teacher. But I used to come to the city for the summers to train in dance. And
Okay.
one day I went on an audition, and I booked the job, and it was a tour. And I was like, I'm going to take the tour. I'm going to leave everything back home. I went on tour. Long story short, when I accepted the job, I didn't think, okay, what are you going to do for work when when you're not on tour anymore? Like I didn't have a backup plan, and
Okay.
so that's when I got into fitness, and I feel like I got into fitness. So I was a personal trainer, and I did group fitness, and
Oh.
then I remember reading about like the Lottie Burke method, like in Backstage magazine. That was like an option for me, and
Uh-huh.
I want to say that it was Anna Kaban who kind of like reignited the idea in my head of possibly
Uh-huh.
becoming a Pilates teacher because she went through the program with you at 2121 Broadway. And
Yep.
so I think that's how I heard about it again. And then when I finally got injured as a professional dancer, that's when I ended up at Performing Arts Physical Therapy and then ultimately across the hall at the Pilates Studio.
Wow. And what time period are we talking about?
That was probably like, I was thinking about this again last night. I think it was initially it was mid 90s.
Well,
Because
Okay.
I think I was there for my first injury. I think I was there after I injured my lumbar spine. Like I had L5S1 disc injury and SI joint dysfunction. I think I went there for the first time and then started Pilates there. And then I think I went back again after I started this show where I had knee surgery, and I went back and I continued. I think that's
Wow.
so
Okay.
if you were across the hall, then it was probably 96 or 97 because
yeah.
when I first started, we had 1,000 square feet. It was an old ballet studio,
Okay.
and we had PT and Pilates in there. And then we opened the place next door, left, and we took the another 1,000 square feet, and opened up the either end of the room.
Uh huh.
And then another place across the hall opened up, and so I moved PT in there, and then what was the PT room I turned into the mat and wall unit room, and then the other
Yeah, I
side was the
remember that.
reformer room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
I
that's so
totally
cool how you can trace that time period, Sean,
Yeah,
based on
so
your
that totally
that's
makes
cool.
sense with what was going on in my head last night. I was going over the timeline, and I remember I think I was a Nick City dancer at the time when I injured my back. I think that's
Wow.
what it was, and I had Vax D treatment, and then I ended up going to you, or
Wow.
something, or your
Well, the normally I would be able to find out because you have to keep records, but
yeah.
my medical records you have to keep them for only 6 years. So I used to keep everything in storage,
So I've been
and
tossed.
now they're gone because I had a storage unit full of
Yeah.
patient files from all the different clinics and stuff. Saying when it's done, you're probably never going to see them again, so you get rid of them. because
Yeah.
it's just, you're
Well,
paying
there's
for that. Now
probably
everything's digital.
lots, like thousands, Sean. Probably thousands of people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's kind of like the same thing I did with Joe's old, studio records, of clients.
Right.
When I got, and now I kick myself in the butt, but at the time it was like, who are these?
Yeah.
These are old
Yeah.
client files. I don't need those. I'm going to get rid of them. And that's,
Yeah.
so that's when, when I got them, that's what I got rid of. But, so I can't tell you what you came for though.
Kira, so I just out of curiosity, when you got your first tour, who was that with?
Oh, my first tour, it was Freedom Williams from CNC Music Factory.
That's pretty big.
Everybody dance now.
That must have been so exciting.
It was so exciting. I mean,
Oh
I
my
wasn't
gosh.
expecting to get this job at all. I totally went on a fluke just to see what like a New York City audition was like. I got the job. I was like, yes, and had no other idea what was going to happen with my life after that.
No way. I mean, you just go. You don't have to think about it. Yeah.
Right.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so Pilates was originally going to be, well, you keep asking me questions. Otherwise, I'll
Well, so I was actually, because I'm thinking about like, your impressive career in dance and that's one tour that you're talking about, but I know you've done a lot more because I just know because I know you, but also because you posted about it a lot, on social media. So, and Sean, I would think that would be, is that like normal in your world in your studio and in PT to have people who are very successful dancers and performers coming and going, I would imagine.
Well, for 30 years, yes.
Yeah, that's so cool. So what was it like?
When I first started, there was really no dance medicine. I mean, there was, Marika was on the east side.
Okay.
And so I opened my place on the west side, and, she took care of the ballet company. She took care of New York City Ballet. And then Peter was the therapist. What was Peter's last name? I can't remember. But he was the therapist down at ABT, but there was no modern companies or Broadway. Nobody had that. So I opened up and started, marketing to, and doing Broadway shows. And I took care of Paul Taylor's dance company and things like that. So I was, one of the few places that you could come and really do that. And I also had a full Pilates studio. So and I integrated Pilates into the physical therapy so that when you came, if you had an injury, you would come and get PT first. And then as you started to get better, I would work with, set up the program and have the Pilates teacher take whoever it was through the workout, and then every week we'd see. And then when you got to the point where you only needed Pilates, well, then you didn't need PT anymore. So, you were done.
Exactly.
And when you were just doing Pilates.
Yeah, and they would pay. I mean, insurance. You're done with your insurance because it was like, well, you're better.
That's
you
the
can
part
just do Pilates.
Yeah.
I know. Well, insurance doesn't cover it. That's the problem. I mean, it really doesn't. And I didn't. And I always, I go by the book. So I didn't. I would have people call up and say, "Can I just come and do Pilates and pay?" And you put it through insurance. So I'd say no.
Wow.
Can't.
Yeah.
You have to have an injury. You have to have a problem. And you come for a while, and then when you're better, then you're done, because that's how insurance works. Because in essence, that's insurance fraud after a while. I mean, because you don't really have an injury anymore.
Yeah.
And that's why,
Exactly.
when we look at what, the cost of everything, when people do stuff like that, that's part of the problem. And I made sure I wasn't part of that problem. I've tried to do things the right way.
But you really, Kira is a great example of how you influenced, people who were maybe either transitioning in careers or just introduced them to Pilates and how you could become a Pilates teacher, maybe something they hadn't even thought about as a side job or like a new career or anything.
Well, here's the thing. I thought I wanted to be a Pilates teacher before I'd ever really taken it. And I remember I must have gone to Drago's, because I remember going to like a front desk and walking up there like, I want to get certified in Pilates. I wasn't even a student.
They were like, okay.
I was really naive. So they were like, so do you do Pilates? And I was like, no, but I'm a dancer. I was one of those. And I don't remember who they were. I just remember like the blank stares and the kind of like disgust that I remember. And then when I actually started doing Pilates, I think that what was so intriguing in comparison to like my traditional like strength training and group fitness was that it reminded me of methodologies that I had learned before, in that like ballet is progressive and systematic training. Like there's an intelligence behind it. and there's the
Yeah.
repetition. And I think that really appealed to me, as I wasn't just going in for an hour and just moving my body for the sake of moving. It was super purposeful, and I felt myself getting stronger. And when I was consistent with Pilates, I would not get injured. When I was a total gym head and I looked like I was super strong, I was not strong at all. I was getting injured left and right.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think it's like a massive appeal to me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of clients, patients who ended up becoming Pilates teachers. They got it through what's her name? I can't even remember her name right now, but it'll come to me.
Okay.
But there's been other people who have done the same thing. They came, they were injured, they then did PT, then they did Pilates. I have some people who went and then became PTs.
Yeah.
I've also a Feldenkrais practitioner. I had people who went and then did Feldenkrais practitioner, became a Feldenkrais practitioner that were dancers. And then I had people who would come and, because I sort of, in my PT, when you got Pilates, it was Pilates. But in my PT, I did my PT work and the things that I also came up with. Like Lori Coleman, went and became a PT, and then she trained with me in my clinic, because she was a dancer. What's her name? Oh, I can't remember. It'll come to me. But go ahead.
So Kira, do you remember who your Pilates teachers were at the time in Sean's studio?
Yeah, well, the ones that stand out to me are Michael and Tone and Brett. But I also worked with an amazing teacher named Paula Greider. I don't know if you remember her.
Yep.
And so she helped me to get my hours in for the certification. And I actually reconnected with her not too long ago on Facebook.
Wow.
I don't remember her name for the longest time, but I could picture her so vividly because she made such a massive impact on me.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I remember.
Okay.
Shari Berkowitz. She was a patient, and then she went and did Pilates.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool.
So couldn't remember it, but
yeah. So Kira, so you were saying that you were there training, and then did you start to do the program at that point?
I didn't do the program, but I did all the prerequisites.
Okay.
So I can't remember what happened, but now that we talk about the time frame, so I was doing my training, I was getting my hours in, I completed all my hours, but also I know that in 97, I was touring a lot. I think 96, 97, I started touring a lot. And then in 98, I booked an off-Broadway show. So I feel like my life became consumed with my first love, which was performing. And I knew I would come back to Pilates, but that was like for when I grew up, when I was ready to have my next life. And that's when I thought I was going to do that. And so I did the show for 2 years, and I got married and moved to LA.
Okay.
But I was, in the meantime, I went to massage school. So it was a 2-year program. I went to the Swedish Institute. So I was a licensed massage therapist, and I moved to LA, which is where I decided I was going to get certified in Pilates.
Okay. So then when you were there, how did that go? And you were like, okay, I'm going to do Pilates. Was it the same kind of Pilates, or?
This is what was so fascinating to me, because I had only been a student, and I fell in love with the work. But I didn't know anything about Pilates history. I don't think I knew anything about elders. I don't think I knew anything about lineage. So I didn't know that I was training under a specific lineage. Pilates was Pilates as far as I knew. So I went to the West Coast, and one of my best friends was like, I'm going to go get certified in Pilates. And I was like, I'll do it too. And so we did it, and I had an awesome time. My first certification was with Physical Mind. And so I did that certification. And then I started working in different studios in LA. And I remember after I'd been working a while, it was really cool because I was exposed to different versions of Pilates. So I worked a lot with other people who trained at Physical Mind, a lot of people from Bazzi, and a lot of people from Marie-José. And I feel like I learned so much being exposed to all those different teachers. But inside, I was like, this isn't what I used to do. I was like, I feel like I'm missing something, and I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what made what I had done before feel so distinct. But and so I started searching. I started looking, like what was it that I did in New York that's different from what I did here? And I think it's when I was looking for a job, and I applied at Equinox. And I remember like auditioning, and it was with Carrie Macy and Sherry Berkowitz, and it was like a fascinating audition, and they would ask me questions like, well, why did you choose to do this? Why did you do this exercise? And I was like, ooh, I like this. And so they told me about the Power Pilates program, and then I ended up going through Power Pilates, and Bob Leekins was actually one of my teachers, and I remembered him from New York. So I was like, oh, this is what I used to do. So it seemed more familiar to me. And then I the classical route from there.
So you sort of like we're starting to do this circle in a way back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like there was missing pieces. Like I remember how I felt. I remember what the workouts were like. Even though I couldn't pinpoint the differences, I just knew I felt different in my body. The workouts felt more like physical. Like, yeah, more rigorous, more physical, more purposeful in a sense. To me, that was my experience. I was just comparing it to what I had started with.
Okay, cool.
So
we're getting a lot of comments. I just want to start to read a little bit. So Marta Kira says, I remember when I started my journey in Pilates and moved to the Caribbean, I found Kira, who at the time you were living in this beautiful island as well.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have a lot of surprised comments about your impressive background that people may not know about, that you're sharing with everybody right now. So that's kind of fun. Yeah. So Sean,
I'm learning stuff about her background that I didn't know either. So there you go.
Oh, really cool.
Yeah.
So far, we're tracing Kira's steps back to your training program, Sean, and your studio. But before we continue, does this type of thing sound familiar to you? Do you hear stories like this from people who ended up doing the bridge, or?
Well, yeah. I hear a couple of things. One is that people who weren't like Kira, who hadn't gone somewhere first, they just went and did a certification. And and they were happy with it, but then when they came and did the bridge, they're like, oh, I feel like I wasn't getting what I was sold, because they said Pilates, but they're different, and this is what Joe taught more so than what I mean. And again, I'm not saying that the other stuff is bad or anything. It's just it wasn't what Joe taught. It wasn't really Romana or Joe kind of.
I have to get my plug. I'm just going to get my wire.
So I still draw. Stuff that I learned in my other trainings, but I definitely lean more towards, what I'm doing.
Right. Well, look, when you train, as a therapist, I mix everything up. I do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But, but when I do Joe's work, I don't have to mix all that stuff up, because he already did it. It's already there for me, most of it. And, when we do the training, I talk about that. It's like, if you understand the exercise, you understand what's before, you understand what's after, you understand the system, and the whole system, or at least the basic, intermediate, advanced. 99.9% of people walk through the door. You have a system to work them out and do what they need to do.
Yeah.
So and
what else was different in my training? Like when I was like a neophyte teacher, I remember I would spend so much time planning every single workout for every single student that I had, because there was no method, no system of progression. So a lot of times it would be like, oh, I bet she'd really like to do this. Oh, this would be really good for her. Or like, but there was no methodology to teaching. I just had a body of exercises to draw from, but I didn't understand the system yet. Right. And that started to come to me at Power Pilates. I started to see like a more vast or overview of what the method is, like beginner, intermediate, advanced, and how to teach it.
Right. Well, and Power Pilates comes from our program, so that's why.
Yeah. Kira, Celia was asking a little bit of this question, Kira, that I'm sure you'll answer more of it as we go as well. But she said, did you specifically figure what that missing piece was?
I think when I found out that there was a classical Pilates, I was like, oh, that's what I studied in New York. I studied classical Pilates. Oh, I studied under Romana's lineage. Like I just had more clarity. And I started to recognize, oh, the first certification that I went through, that came through Eve Gentry's lineage. Like I just started to recognize well, I was learning a little bit of Pilates history that I didn't know before. Before
Yeah.
I was just learning exercises as a student, and I knew it just felt amazing in my body, but I didn't know why per se, you know.
Okay. We have a few other questions here, but I think I'm going to ask you them after we talk a little bit more about the rest of your journey. So you can, we have questions from Angela and something Nicole said and some things like that, but I'll read them after a bit. So eventually you moved back to New York, and then how did you find your way, you know, eventually back to Sean's studio?
Okay, so I moved to LA because I got married. I moved back to New York because I got divorced. And so then I moved back. Yeah, as soon as I got divorced, I was like, I'm back home. But then I was able to come back home because I booked a show. So I was back into performing, and I was only teaching Pilates part-time. So I was doing a lot of things. So I was performing in Fuerza Bruta, and I was teaching on weekends. And I was also a pole dance teacher who co-created a teacher training program for pole dancers. So I was doing all of that at the same time. And then I got the opportunity to become the resident Pilates teacher on a private island in the Caribbean. And so I was like, this is what I need right now. Like, this is what I didn't really want to leave. I didn't want to go.
Kira, you need to write an autobiography. I mean, I feel like I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm like, and then what did you do? And probably everybody else is like, wait, you did what?
Yeah, but when I got offered the job, I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go live in the Caribbean. But because I was happy being kind of unhappy in New York City. I had also, like, just so people understand the background, so I was performing up until I was 42. And I was in a show, and new producers came in and decided to get rid of the entire cast. Like, next week, you don't come back in. So I had no job. I had severed ties with my former business partner. So my income was just gone. And so once my income was depleted, this job opportunity came, and I did not want it, but I was like, you need it. And so I went. And I went for 2.5 years, but I was the only Pilates teacher on the island. So I was the only teacher, and I was not the only teacher. So I was training myself every single day and filming myself and trying to give myself corrections. And it was a semi-equipped studio. And I was used to being on grots at this point. I mean, I have experience on all the equipment, but I've been doing grots for years. And then I was back on contemporary equipment, like with the colors. And I was like, oh my God, red, green, blue, yellow. I don't know how to do this. So then I had to like try to reconfigure it so I could recreate the best I could what the classical exercises felt like, with 5 different colored springs and ropes and risers, and just like everything felt different. So I was there for 2.5 years. It was a great, and it was an incredible learning experience, like a learning experience about me. I had a lot of time for self-reflection because it's a lonely ass island.
Yeah.
A lot of time for self-reflection, a lot of time for personal practice. But I also had so much teaching. I was teaching so many different people, and every single week it was like new clients. And it was just fascinating to me. Like, a lot of people who had done Pilates had really, really strong practices from different schools, and that was really exciting for me to see. But a lot of people didn't know who Joe was, and that's when I started coming with the Contrology Freak Challenge. I was like, how does no one know about Joe?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway, so after my 2.5 years of training myself on contemporary equipment, I moved back to the city, and I was like hungry. I was like, I need to get back into the work. I need to get back to what I'm used to. And so I started taking classes, around the city, but I couldn't find like what I was looking for. Like, I was ready to learn, not just work out. I wanted to learn. And so I had mentioned something randomly on Facebook, and then Miss Elaine drops in my inbox. I was like, who's this? So Elaine comes on my inbox, and she invited me, or you invited me to do a session with you, and it was at the New York Pilates Studio. And I was like, cool, sure, I'll do it. So I go there, and I walk in, and even though it was a completely different location, I was like, this is where I started. I was like, this is my home. I was like,
Yeah.
this is it. Like, even like the old reformers, like the OG reformers, everything. And so I took my first lesson with you. And of course I was like, am I going to like this? And I did. I really liked my lesson. I was like, I want to come back again. And so I trained with you again. And then I was like, can I keep doing this? And then I've been training with you 2 times a week ever since. And that must have been 2017.
Something like that.
Like June or July of 2017.
Yeah.
And you're the one who recommended that I go through the program because you were also Power Pilates trained. And then you ended up bridging there. And I was like, I'll think about it because I wanted to go through a program. So I was looking into different programs and I was like, I wasn't sure. And Sean, as you know, there have been like rumblings about you, but I didn't really know you.
What?
Yeah, there
People
were
rumblings?
rumblings.
What are you talking about? Not me.
So,
Well, listen, I'm an angel. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm an angel.
so I was like, I'm going to check this out by myself. Like, I don't like other people choosing who I can learn from or choosing who I can be friends with. I was like, I think I'm a good judge of character on my own. I don't need your input. So anyway, so I was quietly observing you, Sean, even when I would go and take my lessons. And the cool thing is, you had with your PT office too, and you were working with NYU students who I guess you were mentoring. So I remember just like being in that space and observing you teach them. And I was like, your manner of teaching to me was a gift. And I felt like you were such a generous teacher. And I felt like they felt so comfortable learning under you. And you were so patient and like you encouraged critical thinking. I was like, oh, I dig this. Like, I like that calm approach to teaching where you also have to think. And you don't feel like you're being belittled at any moment.
Well,
Totally.
thank you for that. You know, when I teach, you know, a lot of that comes from, you know, Romana, but it's also, as a teacher, the ones I respected the most were the ones who gave the most.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, me as a teacher, what I want is you to be better than me. That's the goal.
Yep.
And whatever I can do to do that. And I know, you know, certain people and certain teachers that, you know, they have the egos and they do this thing and they put you in this place. And I try to just I want you to be the best that you can be. That's what I expected from my therapy students. I've taken over 100, you know, physical therapy students that, you know, have to come and do their internship for 6 to 14 weeks. And they spend that much time with me, and I give them everything. But they also, I expect everything, like Romana did. It's like, you know, I'll give you everything I can give you, but you need to be, you know, there 100% and doing it. And if you are, you know, I give you everything, and that's what it's about. That's what it should be about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I just find that's really a rare quality in teachers. Like, so it's not, I haven't just had training in Pilates. I've trained in lots of other things. And I think it's often hard to find a training program where you feel like it's a real learning environment. Like you're not being forced to teach a specific way. How do I say it? The teacher's not training you to be a clone of them. I'll put it that way.
you're not given a script.
Exactly. And it's hard to come to it. You're usually given a script and expected to sound exactly like the teacher versus finding your own voice. And I think that's imperative. If you're ever going to become a good teacher, you have to find your own voice, which means you have to be given the freedom to think critically. And I think that's what's super powerful. And on that note, I just want to read this quote, okay? Because after you invited me to do this interview, one of my Facebook memories came up after my first weekend. It's one of my bosses.
Oh,
my
cool.
first weekend of the Bridge program. This is after just the beginning system, okay?
Okay.
I said, this weekend was filled with learning in an environment where asking why was encouraged and being challenged to think critically expanded my understanding of the Pilates method in ways that satisfy my inner geek. It was so cool to examine Pilates as both a workout and a complete system of neuromuscular re-education, discussing how and why each exercise works, plus how, why, and when each exercise fits into the system. Mr. Pilates was a friggin' genius.
That's awesome.
That was after the beginner system.
That's
great.
so cool. I love that. Well, I, agree because also, like you mentioned, I also bridged to Sean's program, And I have had the same experience too. And, you know, a couple things stand out as you were talking that I can also remember thinking as well at the time. And I still do think, you know, when I have observed the trainings and then, you know, participating in teaching with Sean, is that, you know, what I think, Sean, one of your gifts as a teacher is that if somebody asks you a question, you know, during the training, you know, any question at all, most often you ask a question back, which is like, you sort of like a deer in headlights as like a student. You're like, oh my gosh, like Sean Gallagher is asking me a question right now in front of everybody. Like, what's the answer? But like, but it's so different because in my experience, and you know, I've been teaching since 2000. I've had a lot of great teachers, classical teachers over the years who I learned a lot from, but that was never my experience. Usually you'd ask a question and you were told the answer. That was, there's no negotiation about it. There's no, even if it doesn't make sense, there's no conversation about it. It just, this is what the answer is, and that's it. And you're sort of left like, okay, you don't develop and grow as a teacher as much as you do in the way that you ask the question back. So, and the other part that's pretty interesting about that is that you do have that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm on the spot. Like I have to answer this question right now, but it makes you actually think and develop, I think, your skills as far as teaching goes, because you are actually on the spot and you have to think of what's the answer, and then you realize what you really do know.
And it builds confidence.
Yeah, exactly.
I try, you know, listen, when I ask a question, the reason why I ask it is because you have a question, and most of the time the answer is there. If you, as a teacher, when I listen and I see, because when I'm doing a training and I'm teaching people, I don't just like, well, here's an exercise. I'm looking at how everybody's interacting. I'm looking at how you're teaching. I'm looking at that. So I'm learning about how you teach. And then, you know, because that's, you know, where I'm not, the training isn't to teach you Pilates exercises. You should already know those exercises. This is really about how to teach you to be a teacher. And part of that process is when you ask a question, what's the answer? And you know the answer because you've been studying this. And so I try to frame it in a way that it will bring it back to you. And yes, you're put on the spot, but it also, you know, it's not just giving class. I want you to find your place because, you know, Joe's not here, Clara's not here, Ramana's not here, you know, and we can't learn from them necessarily. And everybody has to be their own teacher. You know, you can't, I mean, you know, monkey see, monkey do. I guess you can do that. I mean, we can be just focus on one thing and just look at that and follow somebody, but that's not really being a teacher. I want everybody, you know, because people said to me even with the PT, you know, you should just train people and have a system and they all follow it. And I said, no, everybody who comes, I want them to be their own individual people and they become the best teachers that way. And therapists as well. I mean, whatever it is I'm teaching.
Yeah. Well, it definitely.
Teacher, not teller. Well, I'm not a teller.
No, you're not. But you do have your Seanisms.
Well, of course.
Yeah, those are good. Those are Sean's phrases that he uses.
I quote you sometimes, and I tell people that it's you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Me
Not
too.
Balance within the imbalance.
Yeah, not everybody does that. But you know, but learning and teaching, part of that is that process. If I say it once and it's important, and I never say it again, do you remember it? No. But if we continue, and then you know, it's the foundation because. You know, that term here is a perfect example, the balance within the imbalance. Well, everybody has that. And Pilates addresses it so well. And so once you understand what that really means, and then you understand the system and how to use it, well, then you're golden. I mean, then, you know, you can basically help just about anybody because I mean, you need more than that, but that's like one of those things. And that's, you know, it's something I say often, but there's a reason for that. But I have TM'd it. So what do you know?
Oh, well, good.
What?
I TM'd it, trademarked it.
Oh, you did?
Trademark. Because nowadays, you know, you start something and, you know, you get imitated left and right all the time. You know, ideas, this and that, everything. So, you know, you got to protect your interests now.
That is true.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kira, can you share anything about your experience in participating in the Bridge program? Do you have any specific, memories from doing your training? And what would you share about your experience in general in doing that?
I think like the quote, like from my Facebook memory, I think that really sums it up.
Mm-hmm.
Another memory, that test kicked my butt.
Oh yeah,
Talk about critical thinking skills. How long did it take me? Like 8 hours to do the test? I was like,
probably.
but
Well,
it's, yeah, so
usually somewhere between 5 and 8.
yeah. But
But
it speaks to the training itself because it's the critical thinking piece. Like you don't have the exact same person coming to you. Like you don't have one single type of person coming into the studio all the time. You have to be prepared to teach anyone who comes into the room. So you have to be able to think critically. I think the other thing that stood out to me, I will say, and I think it really resonated for me as a massage therapist. So when I was in school, you obviously start off with like basic myology. So you learn like the origins, the insertions, and the actions of muscles. It's like 101. But then as massage therapists, we are actually trained to look at the body holistically. So we start to look at the neuromuscular system and the myofascial system. And we also look at it from the vista, I'm gonna start speaking Spanish, from the view, or from the viewpoint of Chinese medicine, because we also studied what's it called? 5 element. I just forgot what it's called.
I don't
Five
know.
elements.
Yeah, 5 elements.
Okay.
Got to. So we were trained so that when clients would come into us and they would talk about a specific like pain they were experiencing or dysfunction, we didn't just look at the local area and go to fix the local area. We started to look at postural patterns and movement patterns and then address the body as a whole. And I think that's what really stood out for the first time in any Pilates training that I had, is that that's the language that Sean spoke. That looking at the system not as just beginner, intermediate, advanced, but how do you use the entire method itself, all the apparatus and all of the exercises to provide neuromuscular re-education for your clients. And that's why they move better and feel better in their body. Not just because they came in and sweat for an hour, but like how can you really create programming for your clients that's effective? So that stood to me.
And you come in to work out, and it's a workout, but as a teacher, right, just as I try to teach, I want you to look at people and go, well, where's the problem here?
Yeah.
And I'm not teaching you to be a medical person. It's a movement issue. What's not moving well, what's stiff, what's loose, what's tight, what's strong, what's weak. Put it all together, and then the system facilitates balancing those things out, but you have to understand it first. And that's really what I try to do. So
the other thing, now I'm having all these memories. So the other thing is, like, I feel like in other environments, you're given like these black and white rules, which I know are super important when you first start. But when you're bridging, like you had as much teaching experience as I did, I knew there were gray areas. So like I remember like hearing things like, you never do this when you're doing extension, and you never do this like when you don't curl your chin into your chest. Like there's new science that says you don't curl your chin into your chest. And then I remember specifically doing the push through with you, Sean, and you would spot me and do this. You push your fist into my chest, which is basically what this action is doing, so I get more mobility in my upper thoracic spine. If I don't do that, if I bypass that, I'm basically moving from my waist down.
Right.
And I didn't get that mobility.
Well, I mean, and the thing is, when you say the science, what science? I mean, one article doesn't make it science, and that's why a lot of programs try to use science and say, the science says this, and some of those rumblings is because I'm the one who on social media says, okay, share it. What are you talking about? Let's see it. Let's go through that. I want, I want a dialogue. I want, people, if you're going to claim it, then let's look at it and see if it really does do what it says it does or not.
Yeah.
And almost always what happens, I'll tell you what happens. They go around the bush, they do all this stuff, and then I ask again, and then what they do is they bring up the trademark case.
Yeah. Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
answering the question or providing science so that we can all learn something.
Yeah. I
So,
just thought of another thing too. Um, One thing that stood out about you is that I feel like a lot of people spend time trying to study science to disprove Joe's method or to improve upon Joe's method. But it's like you're using science to understand why it's so effective.
I've
That's
spent
the,
30
the,
years looking
the
at that.
opposite thinking of what I see, what's trending. You know, it's like, what is it about Joe that makes so much sense? Like, why does his system work? Well, here's the science to show that it works.
Totally.
Why it works.
Totally. Yep.
Well, so, because what happens, right? They want to bring all this other stuff into Pilates, and you don't need to because,
Yeah.
science is still catching up with Joe, and he said it. He's 50 years at a time, and when, because science explains life for us, right? It explains whatever we see and whatever we do and those types of things. And Joe spent, and he was a very talented person in looking at the body and movement and understanding. And he spent 40 years, and most of these people, they've got 10 years or 5 years or whatever it is, and they want to do this. And it's like he already figured it out. Let's figure out why now. And their
Yeah.
science really and when we say science, they're all hypotheses, right? But at the same time, looking at those hypotheses and what other people have come up with and saying, look, this does show that it does almost the same thing. And the problem is with science is that unless you use Joe's equipment,
Right.
his exercises,
Yeah.
his breathing, his timings, all those things, uh, and then study that and say, well, what does it do? Because it doesn't really matter, because if we're doing something with different colored springs and ropes and pulleys and this and that all over the place, it's a different exercise. So
Totally.
if it says it's good, then it might not, what we do may not be good. And if it says it's bad, what we do may not be bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because Pilates is so generic now that it doesn't mean anything. So you have to really define it. And that's why, with science, we really need to define what that means and what it says.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, Shauna, what I can add to what Kira was saying about that is that, we go through years of practicing Pilates with our teachers or on our own, being our own teachers, like Kira was talking about as well. And, everybody has like certain exercises that either just never really made sense or you were never really excelled at, whatever the like she was saying, the gray areas. And what stood out to me in your program is like the way you explain how to do the exercises, or, what Joe was talking about or doing when he showed the exercises, like, oh, that makes sense. Like, that's the missing piece that I wasn't doing. Like what Kira just said about the push through and the chin to the chest and how you explain how that works rather than trying to teach us ways to not do it that way.
Yeah.
Or how to get around doing it that way. It's you're teaching how to do it that way. And it all comes together. And you're like, wow, I can actually do this exercise because I didn't understand it before. Now I understand what I'm doing. So I think, what you do is you not only help us grow as teachers, but within our own practice and understanding better what we do.
Well, so much for those people who say I'm a physical therapist and not a Pilates teacher.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like, and it's funny
can't please
because,
everybody.
I've been teaching, I taught Pilates in the university for almost 20 years. I taught at the Jacob's Pillow, a lot more, mostly mat, but, I was teaching, but I also have always taught the apparatus in my studio, not a lot, but I always taught, and I also do it. So it's like, and it's that understanding and then trying to figure out why it made me feel so good, because it does. It makes you feel so good. And it's like all this other stuff doesn't. Like Kira said, when I'm and you're doing the gym and you're really working out the gym, it does certain things, the body changes, but it doesn't give you the same feeling that what this work does.
Yeah, not
especially
at all.
the way that I learned it with Romana, and she took over from Joe, Claire, and, and studied with Joe. So, I mean, to me, that's there are plenty of other people that are in the lineage, but nobody had that experience that she had. That's why I chose her, in the first place, because she had the 20 years, running the studio and really doing the work at the studio with Clara, and then, carrying it all on.
So we're going to be finishing up pretty soon because we're almost at an hour already. We've got 45 minutes. So I just want to ask you a couple more questions, and then we're just going to quickly run through the questions from everybody. But so Sean, what I was wondering was, you know, when you were teaching Kira in the bridge, you know, what stood out to you about Kira as a teacher at the time, and you know, how do you remember teaching her?
Well, you know, part of the thing, Kira, is what, you know, you came, you know, with that background, right? The massage and the, you know, so you had more and you had those questions. And so that, you know, that, and as a teacher, for me, when I get questions, it's a challenge for me as well to be able to try to answer those and understand it, and not, you know, because I know some teachers, if they don't understand, what do? They go, well, that's just the way it is. I try to figure it out and answer it. So you were always a challenge for me, and I love that challenge because I get, you know, I mean, I haven't stopped learning. I mean, like, I still learn about Joe, and you ask me a question and I try to figure it out. So that's, you know, to me, it was, you know, you're saying it's the critical thinking, but you already had that foundation. And so that made it a lot easier to work with you and, you know, take the time and really see how you were doing it and apply it. So it was great.
I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's super cool.
I've never known that.
Cool. Well, I think that's what makes the best teachers, is teachers who are also always students in so many ways.
Totally.
Yeah, definitely. So let me just run through the questions, and then we're going to hear a little bit more about some stuff Kira's got going on now and some of her future plans as well. But I'll just start with the question Joseph has to Kira. Is it a fault of branding that you were not more aware of what lineage you were practicing? It might have saved you a lot of time if you had known.
No, I think I just wasn't aware. I was like a full-time professional dancer. I stumbled upon this incredible studio teaching this incredible method that I just didn't think, oh, there's different ways of doing this. So I don't think it was a thing about, even if they were branded, I don't know if I would have been paying attention to branding.
Well,
totally. Where my head was
when you were there, I still owned the trademark, and I was branding it as, you know, Pilates. So yeah,
see, like, I didn't know all this kind of stuff. Like I really didn't.
Well, because dancers, most dancers, they're focused on what? Dancing. They're not focused on all this other stuff.
Helping my gig. This is helping me continue to gig as long as possible. And eventually it was going to be like my side job, like when I was in between gigs, or, you know, when I grew up, then I'd become a Pilates teacher, that kind of thing. But
so
you finally totally invested in just Pilates and learning. I was not that person at the time.
So you're saying you're now a grown-up. Is that what you're saying?
I'm finally a grown-up. At the age of 51, I'm all grown up. But I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. That's what I'm thinking.
You can be anything you want to be.
I know.
That's true, because you're plastic till the end.
Yeah, because I'm what?
Right? Because you're plastic till the end.
Plastic till the end.
That's another Seanism.
Oh my God.
All right. So Kelly says, my saw completely changed for the better after learning it at Pilates at the Pillow.
Totally.
That's a good comment.
I actually used some of those spot cues yesterday with one of my clients. He's like, oh my God.
Yeah, I love that one. Let's see. Questions. I saw some up here. Let's see. So Marta mentions you never stop learning. That's definitely true. Judy says, I loved going through Sean's bridging program. Judy and I did it together.
Hi, Judy. I didn't think I saw you before, but hi.
Oh yeah, she joined in, but I had just started talking to Kira, so I wasn't able to say hi at the time. But hi, Judy. So Nicole asks about the test. Is that just the written part? Yes, it is.
Written part.
The practical part is basically you have an hour, and you have to do an advanced, you know, session and know everything and do everything. So there's the teaching part, and then there's the thinking part. And the test really makes sure that before I sign that certificate, that I know that you know the system, not just the exercises, but if you get a person, you know, what to leave out and why, you know, all those things. So it's a little bit
But
more.
I have to say, I was nervous for the teaching because my teacher was my body. So I was nervous through the whole testing period.
Yeah,
Through
it's
all the
brutal.
certifications that I've done, that was hands down the most challenging certification program ever, outside of sitting for the state board exam for my massage license,
Yeah,
which
it's a
took me 3
challenge.
hours.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. All
Well, and
right,
how
so
long?
let's see.
Wait. How long's the PMA test take?
I don't know.
I have
Sorry.
no idea.
I was
We don't
like,
know. We're not in the PMA.
Right. I know. I just had to throw that in there.
but
So
yeah, what was
Marta,
challenging about the test with you is that it's not multiple choice. It's all critical thinking.
Yes.
It's not like, ooh, maybe it's C.
yes,
It's like,
that's
nope.
right. Yeah, it's not open book either.
Mm-mm.
No. So
Nope.
then Marta mentions to you, Kira, I met you right after you came back to New York City because I booked a class with Elaine at the New York Pilates Studio. And I remember that.
Exactly.
We went
Yep.
out to lunch after
I
that.
totally
That was
Yeah, I
really fun.
remember.
We
I
went
Yep,
remember.
across
that
the
was
street, right?
yes, at Daphne,
Daphne.
my favorite
Daphne. So,
Oh,
restaurant.
the good old
Yes.
days.
right. The nice Greek place across the street.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that place. So Angela asks you, Kira, how many years into teaching did you feel like you understood the system better?
Better. I was like, I feel like I'm still trying to understand it.
Yeah.
I think maybe probably around the time of my second certification, I started to look at it more of a system, but
Mm-hmm.
I
You had mentioned that.
can't say specifically because I feel like this is like an ongoing process. I mean, you hear me when I take my lessons with you, and I'm like, oh my God, that's just like such and such. You know, like
Yeah.
you're constantly having epiphanies and realizing why the system works and how interconnected all the exercises are.
Yeah.
I can't pinpoint exactly.
Yeah. I
But probably
agree.
my first classical training
Well, it's
Yeah.
a lifetime of work, so you're not going to get it in a year or two.
at all. Because I'm
Right.
like 20 years deep, and I'm like, I still can't understand the roll. I can't do a roll up still. It's ongoing. It's ongoing.
All right.
It's hard.
There's a lot of shock and amazement about the 8-hour test, just mentioning that. Nicole
Well,
said, I've
not
always been
every-
nervous to test out. She mentions that.
Not everybody takes 8 hours.
That's just me.
I took
usually
5 hours. I remember
it takes
that.
somewhere between 4 to 8, depending on, how if you're used to writing things out like that and how fast you can write. I mean, there's other,
It may not have
because
been-
also, but it's not on a computer. You write it out. You have to write
Mhm.
everything out, so it takes time.
Yeah. Cami asks, is the test very hard? It's not that it's hard. It's just that it's so thorough that it just takes time because of all the writing that you have to do.
Well, if you know the system and you've studied it, it's
Yeah.
not hard. It's not like
Yeah.
it's not rocket science. It's
Exactly.
Pilates, and it's the exercises, and it's a system, and and there's the basic intermediates. You have a manual to that you can follow, and that's what it's based on. And then when you're done, and you study that, and if you don't study it, then you may not pass because and there's safety issues, and just like Ramana, if you get the safety issues wrong, you fail because we need a safe studio first and foremost.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
So I'm
it's
going to
all
read
about
one more.
Thinking
Yeah,
skills, which is what makes a good teacher. So that's what I felt
totally.
like it was. It's about my critical thinking skills. How can I work with different people?
Yeah, exactly. Marta says, I've read something today. When you're nervous about something, you're doing it right. That's cool.
Interesting.
I
Well,
like that.
I feel like when you're nervous about something, it's because you really care about it.
Yeah, definitely. So, Kira, what do you have going on? Like, do you have any projects you're working on? Do you have classes? Anything
Yes.
planned? Okay.
Well, I teach virtually Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12 Eastern time, different level classes.
Okay.
I specifically chose to teach mat classes because I wanted to make it as accessible to anyone. I love working with people who are not Pilates teachers as much as I love working with Pilates teachers. And then tomorrow I start my pop-up workshop series featuring the Magic Circle. So that's every Thursday for 6 weeks. I teach live on a limited schedule. I teach in person in a studio on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the evenings. And what else am I doing? Right now I have the New Year challenge on Pilates Anytime. I was really lucky that they asked me to create a 10-day challenge. It's Pilates mat with journaling, which is another like love and passion of mine. It's an important part of my life. So it's a combination of Pilates mat classes with journaling exercises, and it's called I Am Resilient.
Cool.
Nice.
Oh,
Very
that's
good.
really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the
Fun.
variety of things that you're doing.
Yeah.
So now, is your magic circle, is that like a group class, the magic circle?
Yeah, it's a
for
group class.
anybody to
It's a group
join?
class on
Okay,
Zoom.
cool.
And it's designed to be progressive. So we're going to make it like progressive and systematic, just like the method. So it's not just about we squeeze a circle here, we squeeze a circle in the 100. It's like, why? Like, why are you using this circle?
Cool.
How can you help?
Fun.
How can you use the circle to help you find the missing links in your practice so you actually get stronger and don't use it just to feel the burn?
Yeah, I love that.
So
Cool.
you're teaching what you were taught. It's perfect.
Yeah,
It's great.
exactly.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm so happy to hear that.
purposeful.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Awesome. Well, great. Thank you so much, Kira, for joining us tonight. Really appreciate your time and everything that you were saying. And I think a lot of other people do too. We've got so many comments and lots of hearts and smiles and applause and all kinds of emojis going by on the screen.
Comment, sorry. Hi, Nicole.
So thanks, Kira. I really appreciate it, and
Thank you.
You know, it's always great to see you continuing the journey. It's always great.
When are you going to give me that 80-inch reformer?
Well, now you're starting to sound like Elaine. You want a magnesium while you're at it?
Reformer.
You want a
Oh yeah, I was
while
going to
you're
say
at it?
I want the magnesium, not the reformer.
Oh, I want
Really?
the reformer.
You don't want the original reformer that I have, the really old one?
Kira's talking about the
I
one
want
from
the
the
80-inch
city.
that was in the studio.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You don't want that one, Elaine?
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, that would be cool too.
She's like, I'll take them both.
Well, if we can figure it out, it might go up to Beckett. We'll see.
Oh, that's
still
cool.
not. I still haven't figured out what I'm doing with the studio since I closed it because of the pandemic. And once this is finally under like relative control, we'll figure it out.
Oh, I get it. I think a lot of us are still in limbo.
Oh yeah.
Well, and I was lucky enough to be able to to close, but I don't want to open and then like this Omicron thing. Some places got shut down again, and I just don't want to do that. I just want to make sure that we're in a relatively good place before I decide. And since I just turned 64, I'm not sure I really want to do all this stuff for so long again. Anyway, so we'll see.
Wow.
Okay.
I mean, I want to keep teaching. I just don't know if I want to do all the headache
Physical
of
stuff.
this. Oh, well, no, even the physical stuff. I'm still doing PT on Broadway. I just don't know if I want. I don't know if I want to do all the paperwork for the studio stuff.
Yeah.
Running and managing the studio. That I did it for 30 years, and it's like,
it's a lot.
In New York, and New York's probably if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere because it's one of the hardest places to do it. And I mean, the cost even with the cost going down, the cost is still. If I got a space like Elaine, I'd still pay 2 or 3 or 4 times as much as she pays out in the boonies.
Oh yeah.
So, so it's
The
boondocks.
Well, what can I say? On that note, tomorrow we are talking. I'll be talking with you, Sean, tomorrow about the making of the Pilates anatomy posters.
It's going to be
the
fun.
History behind that.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
It'll be great. Yes.
So thanks everybody, and Kira, really, thanks a lot. I appreciate you joining us and helping, being part of this. It's really great.
Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow, Elaine, from my
Okay.
Bye,
I'll
guys.
see you then.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.